Order, order. The question is that this House has considered the introduction of UK-made zero-emission buses. I call Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling me in this debate, and thank the Backbench Select Committee, or Backbench Committee, for listing it in the way that they have. At the outset of the debate, could I declare I'm a member of the All-Parliamentary Group on Buses? The chairman of that group, Sir Robert Goodwill, should really have been here today to move this debate, but unfortunately, because he's chair of a select committee, his duties find him elsewhere in the House today. But I just want to put on record his commitment and his desire to have been here on behalf of that group that he chairs as the member of Scarborough and Whitby. And I also have, I think it's important to put on record, I also have a major manufacturer that makes buses operating in my constituency. The UK is blessed actually with three major manufacturers, Alexander Dennis, Switch and Wrightbus, and each of them make a very significant contribution to the UK economy and to local employment around the entirety of the United Kingdom. But this debate is about the introduction of UK-made zero-emission buses. UK-made zero-emission buses. Why do I say that? Well, you see, there's 40,000 buses currently on the roads across the whole of the United Kingdom. Presently, there's about 3,000 of those buses are zero-emission. So there's a huge opportunity, because government obviously, and quite rightly, wants to get away from diesel-powered buses and onto zero-emission buses. So there's a massive opportunity. But of those 40,000 buses, that opportunity, I fear, is under threat. In 2020, the government committed, made a very, very important statement. They said that they wanted to level up across the country with 4,000 beautiful British-built buses that are cleaner, greener, quieter, safer and more frequent. What an ambition. It's an ambition this House got behind. It's an ambition this House across the parties got behind, and it's an ambition that I still hold to and I hope that we can deliver on. But I'm afraid that the Department needs to look at the implementation of that policy, because I don't believe it is resulting in beautiful British-built buses actually being purchased by the very serious amounts of money that have been set aside for the ZEBRA scheme, or the zero-emission scheme. The original ambitions that drove and the design of that policy to support UK bus manufacturers have been overlooked in the implementation and the rollout of the policy, resulting in many local authorities and transport authorities buying non-UK-made British buses. And I'll give way to my colleague from East London.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate. It's always good to support a colleague when they get such an important debate like this. On the issue of the UK-made buses, which he's now repeated several times and quite rightly, does he agree with me that it is all the more important now when we look at the challenge coming from China and the Far East, where more and more there is a huge challenge been made towards the West and the UK, and we have to meet that challenge, rise to it, and in the way he has conducted, that's what the government needs to respond to.
Thank the member for raising that. I was going to come on to that point later, but I'm going to come on to it now, because I think it really does get to the nub of this issue. So the ZEBRA 1 and 2 schemes promised to the United Kingdom £312 million of taxpayers' money to fund the purchase of 2,270 buses. So that's a major impact into providing these zero-emission buses. I hope members are shocked by the next figure, because of those 2,270 buses, the final purchasing decisions that have been made, 46% of those buses will be manufactured outside of the UK. 46%. Principally by China. Now, at one point you have to giggle, because, you know, one has to say we're making zero-emission green energy buses close to shore, home, for the home market, and therefore it would result that the footprint of the manufacturing of those things should be green also. But 46% of them are coming from, apart from Australia, the most furthest away country in the world. And they're being delivered to us. And those buses that come, and I'm not going to bash the companies that make them in China, but those buses that come actually have a shorter life cycle on our roads, almost a third less on our roads, and they're less, ultimately, therefore, less efficient. And yet 46% of that zebra money is going overseas. Now, what's that money doing? Supporting overseas technology. This is cutting-edge technology. It's supporting overseas jobs, cutting-edge, well-paid, highly skilled manufacturing jobs, and it's supporting it in other countries. And yet we are crying out for that money to be spent on high-skilled, green energy, high-tech jobs across the entirety of the United Kingdom. There's something like 10,000 people currently employed in the supply chain of manufacturing buses across the United Kingdom. Electronics engineers, hydrogen engineers, manufacturers, engineers of steel. And all of this is being undermined by a policy that was put in place to build beautiful, British-made, clean, green, better buses. And I'm pleading, not on behalf of the companies, so they're big companies, but I'm pleading on behalf of the workers across the United Kingdom who are entitled to these jobs, who are entitled to bring stuff home to their wives and families and their husbands and families, and to make sure that these jobs stay in British hands. Now, I'm not arguing that we buy an inferior product, because the fact of the matter is that the British-made buses, whether they're made by Switch, by Wrightbus or Alexander Dennis, are the leading cutting-edge buses in the world. And that is shown because they not only manufacture for this country, but other countries actually demand those buses. But we can't go in and undercut other bus companies in countries that make buses. The countries that buy buses of us don't actually make buses in their home country. And so we're competing in a fair market. But unfortunately, one of the largest countries in the world, the Chinese state, is manufacturing buses, subsidising the manufacture of those buses, and seeing that technology come here, and it's undermining us. And I think we really have to take a good, long, hard look at this and ask the question, is that really where we want to be? Now, every constituency in the UK benefits from British-made manufactured products. And I don't say that glibly, but it's actually factually based. I've gone through a register of all of the councils, local authorities across the whole of the United Kingdom that have currently received money from the zero-emission scheme, and all of the constituencies therefore represented in the House by that. It's about 180 constituencies in the House. And those 180 constituencies benefit in some way from the manufacture of buses in the United Kingdom. They're getting zebra money, but unfortunately, 46% of that money's going outside of this country. And they're not ending up buying the British product. Now, I could, Mr. Chairman, but I won't, but I could read through every single local authority that has received millions of pounds, and I have it here. I'm happy to leave it in the library for members to study. And it goes through every single local authority that has received millions upon millions upon millions of pounds. And yet, some of those authorities are not spending that money on British-made products. There's a couple of outstanding examples that I will bring to the attention. First of all, earlier last year in Blackpool, there had been there had to be a complete and total re-tender after protests led by the chairman of our APPG and myself and other members of that committee. And we pushed the government to re-tender that Blackpool order because it had gone to a Chinese company. And it was an order of 90 buses. That's about 30 million quid's worth of manufactured goods. And I'm glad to say that that re-tender which had originally gone to the Yutong company in China. Following the retender, Alexander Dennis won that tender because they then discovered that actually the social and economic benefit that flowed from the manufacture of those buses in the United Kingdom outweighed a slightly cheaper product that was being brought in from overseas. Transport for London at the weekend announced the purchase of over 100 new double-decker buses, double-decker electric buses, and unfortunately that order has been made to a company called BYD, which is a Chinese company, and it further increases their reliance on overseas supply chain. I want to deal with this matter about Transport for London. No matter which part of the United Kingdom we come from, no matter about our passion about Ulster, our passion about Scotland, or Wales, or other north of England, London is our capital. It is a flagship. What happens in London, the world sees. It is the window into the United Kingdom. And when I stand on the terrace of this house and I look at the buses going over Westminster Bridge, and I see bus after bus going over that, and I know by the shape of them, that was made in Ballymena. That was made in Ballymena. That was made in Scotland. That was made in Ballymena. I know by the shape of them that those buses are ours. And we're proud. It says to the workers in my constituency, look what you've done. Isn't that fantastic? You're a window to the world. People see those things, they jump on and off them, and they say these are fabulous examples, fabulous advertisements of the skill set that is the United Kingdom. And then I hear today that a £40 million contract has been handed by TfL to BYD in China to make the next 100 buses for this city. Now, there's thousands of buses in this city. People say you'll hardly notice them. It's not the point. The point of the matter is that is where we are spending our money. And that will then soon become the flagship. And those 100 double-decker buses, now people say, well, they're slightly cheaper. I'm saying they're penny wise and pound foolish if that's the way they're making the decision, because it's much more disturbing than just being slightly cheaper. I take the view that it's not green to buy the buses from so far away whenever we're manufacturing them at home. But in 2021, the United Nations Working Group on Human Rights wrote to BYD and asked them this: if they had received information that we have received information that your company may be involved through your supply chain in alleged forced labour, arbitrary detention and trafficking of Uighur Muslims and other minority workers. BYD did not respond to that inquiry by the United Nations. And whenever they were approached by the trade magazines to respond on this, BYD refused to comment. Now, all I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, our nation has a duty to make sure that if we are buying overseas products, that we're not buying them from a country that is using slave labour or abusing its workforce. Because I'll tell you one thing, our workforce in the United Kingdom is not abused. They're paid good wages, they're making good product, and they're proud of what they do. But if this is happening, it is a double offence on what we should be looking at and what we should be doing with this resource. Of course, I'll give way.
I think the gentleman will give way, and he's underlined a very crucial issue, the issue of human rights abuses, of persecution, of trafficking, of all sorts of things that are happening to ensure that China can produce a bus cheaper. When it comes to our councils buying these buses, Mr. Chairman, in the United Kingdom, surely there must be, and we're brought up in Parliament regularly, it's brought up all the time, is there not a need for government here centrally to ensure that if that's what's happening, then them buses are not bought, or indeed any product is not bought?
Thank you, and that is a point I will come whenever I'm looking at some of the requests I will make of the Minister at the end of the debate, and thank the member for making that very important point. I would just leave this issue of Transport for London. I would appeal to Transport for London. Transport for London has been one of the most brilliant customers Northern Ireland has actually had. They actually allowed us to come up with the new iconic London double-decker bus, which is a flagship. It's been brilliant. And whether it's been a Conservative-controlled council or a Labour-controlled council, the mayors, respectively, have been absolutely brilliant about helping Wrightbus and helping that company go forward. But this decision by the current Mayor and by Transport for London should be taken back and looked at again, because the flagship, our nation's capital, having a bus that has a questionable reputation about how it is made and seeing £40 million of the Zebra money going to it is, in my view, totally wrong and is scandalous. I want to turn to some of the policy asks that I will leave with the Minister. I'm delighted that the Minister is visiting my constituency soon. He's going to, I hope, visit Wrightbus and other manufacturers and see the supply chain across the whole of our country and all the other little companies, micro companies that rely on this manufacturing giant. But I want to draw the attention to the Minister to a number of things about the impact of Zebra. And it's this: the Department for Transport should ensure that no Zebra 2 funding is used by local authorities to purchase buses from outside the UK, the point the member for Strangford made. And to support this, bus operators should be encouraged by the government to place a greater emphasis, whenever they're doing tenders, on social value for the tender, the wider economic community impact when they're evaluating their tenders. So I'm not asking the government to do anything illegal or to have any sleight of hand. I believe the law allows the government to weight the tenders in such a way that British manufacturers will be the successful outcome. I'm not asking that a company in my constituency is the only one that benefits. Alexander Dennis, Switch, they're all competing companies. They all make brilliant products. They should all be allowed to have a fair crack of this whip. One can't dominate the entire market. But I want those companies to have that fair crack of the whip. They can't have a fair share in this market whenever they're being outbid and outmanoeuvred by what's happening in another country. Secondly, I would like the government would also need to give industry a long-term confidence in what they're doing by setting a plan, an ambitious plan, to say a quarter of all the buses on British roads, 10,000 buses on British roads, will be emission-free from 2025 to 2030. The government said that to those companies, they would gear up, they would scale up, it would reduce the overall cost of the final product, and at last we would realise the potential that these companies have, and we would see going forward a vast array of new tech coming through British companies and through British manufacturers, because they have the confidence that there's 10,000 orders there to keep their companies in business for year after year after year, and it will increase investment in those companies. The Department of Transport should consider creating a Crown Commercial Services framework for zero-emission vehicles to supply and expedite the tender process, and they should collaborate with other government departments to conduct a formal review of how other countries purchase buses and how they prioritise domestic content when evaluating their own tender process. I hope that the DFP and the DBT should also provide further detail on Trade Remedies Authority and support with the process of gathering evidence of unfair practices. There have been allegations that some of these orders have led to kickback through other companies. That should be investigated, and this should be totally transparent, because I can tell you one thing: the 3 British companies, there's no kickback through those companies. It's clear and transparent what's going on, and I hope that the government will allow us today to have confidence in how we view the future, and to see our British manufacturing companies being able to say, we've turned the page today and we're going forward on a new footing, and in future the lion's share, the overwhelming majority of Zebra money will be spent on British manufacturing.
Ian Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Rossendale. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and can I congratulate the Honourable Member for North Antrim and my right honourable friend for Scarborough and Whitby for securing this important debate. The issue of zero-emission buses is a subject I've worked on for some time, both in my current role as chair of the Transport Select Committee, but also in my previous guise as a minister in the Scotland office. when I had a number of dealings with Alexander Dennis in Falkirk. And I was very pleased in particular that when, alongside Falkirk Council, the Scottish Government and other local stakeholders, the Falkirk growth deal was agreed, which included, if my memory serves me correctly, £10 million for a public transport net zero tech cluster that Alexander Dennis was very closely involved in. So it is a really important sector, and I absolutely share the ambitions that my honourable friend for North Antrim has set out about having a vibrant zero-emission bus network in this country, and that the lion's share of those are indeed manufactured by companies on these islands. I just want to put the issue in a slightly more of a balanced context. It's very easy to get into buy British against buy overseas. In reality, bus companies often work with each other, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think Alexander Dennis, for example, has worked with BYD in the past, and some of the chassis. I'm sorry, this is echoing a little. I don't know if that's me or the technology, but I hope you can hear me okay. As I say, Alexander Dennis have worked with BYD in the past. So I think we just have to be slightly more nuanced about what buying from a particular company means. I think the issue that the honourable friend for North Antrim got absolutely right is what we need is fair competition. I don't think it's in anyone's interest that we have sort of, in whichever direction it is, an artificial purchase of buses. They have to be good quality at a fair price. But it's how you look at what that fair price is that matters. It's not just the headline price on, I imagine bus showrooms are slightly different from car showrooms, but whatever the sticker in the front of the windscreen is, that's not the full price. You do have to take on board the wider issues, like the social value points the honourable member identified. The whole life cost is important as well. This technology is still in its nascent form. So what does it mean when the bus comes to the end of its working life? Is there a second-hand market for it? What happens to the batteries? Over what period of time? These are important factors that need to be included when looking at the whole life cost. If there are concerns about human rights, as the Honourable Member for Strangford said, that also needs to be factored into the equation. And the hidden subsidies as well that may or may not be present. This isn't an example from the world of transport, but I have a company in my constituency who is world-leading at making industrial lifts and pickers and so on. And the chairman of the company spoke to me at an event fairly recently and said, our products are the best in the world. Yeah, we would say that, we are. But we are being undercut by competition from China, whose products are also good quality, maybe not quite as good, but they are still of good quality, but are considerably cheaper. And when asked, the chairman of this company in my constituency asked, how have you managed that? Our government's very helpful to us. And I think the cost they have in running their actual building, their factory, is significantly subsidised. And that's the point I'm making. I want to see open competition. I want to see fair competition so that British products, which are world-leading, can thrive fairly. But the true costs also have to be highlighted and be very transparent, so that if a local authority or whoever else is purchasing these vehicles has to show that we have worked through the full costs, the whole costs of purchasing one bus against another. The point about fair competition was also made in a slightly different area of transport last week. My committee had a session on electric vehicles, private cars. And one of the questions I asked our witnesses was, given that in the last previous 24 hours, President Biden's administration had just announced some tariffs for the import of Chinese-made electric vehicles and other products into the United States. Should the UK and indeed Europe more widely also consider such a tariff? And the answer that I got, I was somewhat surprised with. I thought there would be a demand for that. But the witness says, no, many motor manufacturers don't want that. They want to have the fair and open competition, because that's what drives innovation, that's what drives a better product, that's what drives a more reliable and better price for the customer. And that's absolutely right. But it has to be on the basis of fair competition. And I say looking at the costs in the round, not just the headline figure, the sales figure. So I'm not sure at this point exactly how we ensure that local authorities and others are obliged to look at that whole cost, but it's something I hope the Minister will take away and reflect on. Because the government is right, it is putting a lot of money into zero-emission buses. The UK sector is world-leading and has an enormous potential to become a major player both here and to export those buses overseas. But I do think we need just to step back a little and look at this issue in the round. And I hope that today's debate will help to further that cause. And I once again thank the Honourable Member for North Antrim for taking the effort to secure this debate. Thank you.
Kenny McCaskill.
Thank you, Mr Rosendale. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I start by congratulating the member for North Antrim for securing this debate. I thought his speech was both passionate but indeed spot on in terms of analysis and indeed in presentation. He and I may disagree in many aspects, in particular on the Constitution, but on his analysis of the requirement for these buses to be made in the United Kingdom, we certainly are in agreement. It's not that long since we were promised a Brexit bonus and it was branded on the side of a bus. The irony is that the Brexit bonus is going to be that the bus is going to be imported from China, and that is simply scandalous. I'm advised by Unite the Union that there's a suggestion that the London buses being bought from China will be £100,000 cheaper than those that can be manufactured in Andrew Alexander Dennis Limited in Falkirk or indeed elsewhere. I think there's two aspects to that. First of all, there is the great danger, as the United States has correctly acted upon with regard to cars, that the market is being flooded to create a monopoly situation, to knock out any competition, and then you're left with whatever they'll charge you, because this is undercutting, and they are flooding in, as are manufactured motor vehicles. And indeed, the second aspect is, if the factories that currently exist are lost, then the cost to the taxpayer, as we've seen 40 years on in the miners' strike, the cost in terms of devastation to the communities, the cost in terms of unemployment benefit, the cost of all the social harms that go with it, are far, far greater. It's on that basis that we have to ensure that these orders stay in the United Kingdom. I would like to see them go to Alexander Dennis Limited, but I can appreciate that there are other factories in the United Kingdom, although not those that simply assemble buses that are made elsewhere. That is not acceptable, and those who are simply up front for Yutong or whatever are not UK-made buses. So that's the particular point I'd like to make, but I think there's an aspect to it, because it is about having to decarbonise, and this should be about a virtuous circle, because we do have to change. Global warming is happening. Although huge progress was made by the motor industry, and I recall arguments in the City of Edinburgh over the pollution that comes from diesel buses, it has reduced significantly. But there does come a time when we do have to recognise that our vehicles do have to transition over as we're changing our renewable energy over. I know that we are looking at electric buses. I actually argue, and I'll come on to argue, for hydrogen buses, which Alexander Dennis Limited manufacture. There's good reason for that. We do know that electric cars are coming in, but that it's one thing in the City of London. It's quite another in rural parts of Scotland. An electric car can be a considerable difficulty if you're travelling long distances, and not just the Highlands. In my own constituents of East Lothian, finding a charging station can be difficult. Buses are also in a difficult and different situation. I recall meeting a good friend of mine who was the managing director of Lothian Buses, and he made the point that they do have electric buses. They weren't particularly keen on them, as I'll explain, because they were double-axled. It made it difficult to go into certain routes. It certainly chewed up the road. He also anecdotally and quite humorously pointed out that the Annandale Street depot at the top of Leith Walk, right in the heart of Edinburgh, he pointed out that if they charged every bus there, nobody in Leith would be able to boil a kettle. Such would be the drain upon the grid. So it's not so simple. But the particular point he made that struck home with me was he made the point that their buses go out at 6 in the morning and they return at 12 at night. They change drivers, the buses keep operating. They don't want those buses off the road for 2 hours or 3 hours. They can't afford that. They want those buses running. And that's why hydrogen is the fuel that he wanted. But of course it requires an infrastructure. You require to be able to refuel them. But hydrogen buses operate in Germany. Hydrogen buses operate in Aberdeen, probably in the City of London. They've certainly operated in Glasgow. Alexander Dennis Limited is there. Scotland is decarbonising. Hydrogen is coming in. The National Grid electricity supply operator tell me that they anticipate 100% of green hydrogen to be manufactured in the UK will be manufactured in Scotland. It's not rocket science to begin to join the dots. Hydrogen's coming in. There's a plant going to Grangemouth, a stone's throw from Alexander Dennis Limited in Larbour. There's a hydrogen plant coming into my own constituency because there's a decarbonisation going on in the whisky sector. When I spoke to those bringing in the hydrogen factor, I said, will you have excess hydrogen? They said, yes. Could we use it for fuel? Absolutely. This is a more rural area that I live in, but it certainly makes smaller buses more affordable if you can have cheap energy that's been manufactured and otherwise going to waste. It's why in Orkney Islands they're looking at hydrogen-propelled ferries, because they've got so much hydrogen being manufactured on the island, they cannot get it off the island. So hydrogen is that fuel. But we have to have a virtuous circle. We do have to decarbonise. We do have to change and alter our society. But the new renewable future should not just be in terms of manufacturing, and the manufacturing basis we have a just transition. It should be ensuring that the fuel that we're blessed with in terms of cheap, available green hydrogen should be used in fuel buses that are manufactured here, preferably in Falkirk, but certainly elsewhere in the United Kingdom. That is a just transition. At the present moment, the purchasing of buses from China is an unjust transition, and indeed, as with what is happening in the North Sea, it is a sellout of those who have contributed to the economy of this country over years and who should be the basis of the new economy that we require to enter into.
Ben Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And thank you to the member for North Antrim for bringing forward this very important debate. It was a pleasure to meet with him recently and bus manufacturers that he invited to the House of Commons and to discuss this issue in more detail, one that is hugely important for jobs and the economy in Great Britain. At first, I wanted to touch on the positive impacts of some of the zebra funding that has come our way within Nottinghamshire and within Mansfield particularly. In March of this year, we brought forward a £13 million investment in 23 new electric buses, which will serve the people of Mansfield. We previously had 2, which were made by Alexander Dennis. We continue to prioritise that UK manufacturing. So the Berry Hill Flyer, we delivered a couple of years ago now, an electric, all-electric service. 23 further buses on the 1, 6, 7 and 16 services will be delivered over the next 18 to 24 months, replacing those older diesel buses, with £2.8 million of that £13 million investment coming from the Zebra 2 scheme and from Department of Transport. So really grateful for that opportunity to deliver a better public service, to deliver that clean and greener transition in our public transport network. There are still challenges around the infrastructure, and the Honourable Member touched on the issue of electric charging infrastructure in rural areas. In particular, that's something I've spoken at great length to bus companies about in our part of the world recently. And we are also developing significant hydrogen fuel technology in the East Midlands through our hydrogen partnership, working with partners like Toyota, like Trent Barton, bus company, on the opportunities to deliver that. And I certainly see, whilst there are challenges around the use of hydrogen in private vehicles, certainly for bus companies, it's a massive, massive opportunity that we need to focus on and develop as well. I'm really proud, actually, in recent years to have worked on the new East Midlands Combined Authority, which will help to take that process forward and will help us to develop that technology and skills in the industry, as well as a fourfold increase in transport funding locally, which again I'm very grateful for, devolved down to our part of the world to help us make a massive impact, to deliver a better, more joined up bus service, fill some of those gaps, and obviously support this transition to a cleaner service. But in addition to that investment and what it means in terms of buses on the road, we're also adding value locally through our partnership through us and Nottinghamshire County Council and Stagecoach, working with West Notts College in my constituency to support learners as well. So they are now, through this scheme, through this manufacturing scheme, and working with Stagecoach, doing work experience with the bus company, those learners who are working in engineering and manufacturing, working on vehicles, are out with Stagecoach, learning the trade on the job, getting that work experience, getting those relationships with employers and access to job opportunities in the future, which is fantastic. We're not only building those buses in the UK, but actually supporting young people in my constituency to repair, to maintain them, and to work on them too, which is fantastic for my part of the world. It would be remiss of me, Chairman, in any transport debate not to mention that buses drive on roads, and it's also really important that we continue to get that investment in our roads around Nottinghamshire, around the country. As I say, we can shift as many people onto public transport as we like, but we still need that investment in our road network. Huge, huge challenges for us locally after massive flooding challenges, after massive, or the wettest winter on record in Nottinghamshire, certainly, over this winter. And we have had significant extra investment from government, which again is a step forward. It would certainly be much worse without that. But we need to work with the new combined authority, the new mayor. We need to work to bring forward some of that funding. That is a huge amount of funding scheduled for 2025 and onwards, a great opportunity for us. But we do need that now. And I'd urge the Minister to consider that, as well as to help me to lobby our regional mayor, who will have that funding to bring that forward. I was very disappointed, as you might imagine, not to be elected to that role myself, but I certainly had significant plans to bring forward that funding early and to get that infrastructure investment delivered. A need now to lobby our Labour mayor to deliver that. And I trust that government will support me and support colleagues in the region to do that. But like the Honourable Member for North Antrim, I want to see our new buses built in the UK. It's hugely important to jobs, to skills in the way that I've described, to young people looking to get into this sector. We are massively short of skills, particularly in electric and hydrogen vehicles. If you go down any garage and try and get your car sorted, I went to a garage near where I live the other day and I said it was a hybrid, and they said, you can't come here, mate, because we don't know what we're doing when it comes to hybrid vehicles. We are massively short of those skills. So we need to be developing that in our region as well, working with colleges in the way that I've described for us locally. But what I want to know from the Minister really in this space is that whilst I understand those procurement decisions are made locally, either by the bus companies, by Stagecoach in our case, working with us in partnership as a transport authority, in the future probably by our regional combined authority as the new transport authority, is government doing everything in its power to ensure that, in the way that the Honourable Member described, we are taking full advantage of those procurement rules and processes? He mentioned things like community and social value in that tendering process. Pretty difficult to add value in a local community in the UK if you're building stuff in China. We need to ensure that we get that added social benefit and added economic benefit here through fair competition, but making sure that that fair competition values the things that we value for our communities, those skills, that investment, those jobs, that is so important. And I wonder if the Minister can reassure me that he takes all of those steps, the Department of Transport take all of those steps to ensure that that happens, what conversations he might have had with those local authorities who are bidding into this, or who are seeking to deliver this investment, to ensure that that is clear to them. And perhaps that the department might want to consider those factors and where these buses will be made when it decides where funding is given. It's one thing, the procurement process in itself, but the department will decide who gets to access and who is granted this funding, which is another opportunity for government to assess and prioritise this question of where those buses will be made and manufactured. So whilst they are local procurement decisions, there are a number of ways and steps and mechanisms through which ministers and the department can ensure that we're getting best value and that the majority of those buses in the future can be built here in the UK. Although there are no bus manufacturers in my constituency, there are certainly countless young people looking to benefit from the skills, looking to benefit from the career opportunities of working in automotive engineering and manufacturing, and there are certainly huge benefits to my constituents in terms of having those high-quality, low-emissions vehicles on our roads. As we look to push people into public transport, we look to deliver, using that new funding that I've worked to secure over recent years, that more joined up and better public transport network. It's a huge opportunity for us. So hopefully the Minister can offer some reassurances in that space about government's commitment to British manufacturing. And I certainly look forward to working with him, with our new regional combined authority, with his transport funding, to deliver a better network for my residents.
Jim Shannon.
Mr Chairman, it's indeed an absolute pleasure to speak in this debate. Can I first of all thank my honourable friend and colleague, the member for North Antrim, for introducing the debate so very well. And this is not just something that the honourable member has done today. This is something he's done in all his elected life, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he has done over the years. His commitment to right buses, in particular in North Antrim, can never in any way ever be disputed. So I wish him well. He said that the Minister will be coming to his constituency. I'll tell you, whenever he comes to North Antrim, he'll never get the lemon drizzle cake that he got in Newtownards. So you have an even harder task to take on board. I'm not sure, you can always ask me in Newtownards to send it up to you, by the way, and I'll make sure that you have the same drizzle cake available for the Minister's visit. And again, good to see the Minister in his place and the Shadow Ministers as well. The factory in the honourable member's constituency is something of pride to all Northern Ireland MPs, and the world-class groundbreaking research and development carried out there is indeed something in this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland we can be immensely proud of. I just want to start by referring, as I did in the intervention, to the honourable gentleman about Chinese buses. We're always looking for the fair and level playing field, but there's something incredibly wrong, not wrong just for the buses and the purchases and the price of the buses, but something wrong with the Chinese abuse, human rights abuse, the persecution of ethnic minorities and religious minorities as well, whether they be Uyghurs, or whether they be Christians, whether they be the Falun Gong or any other ethnic group. And I do feel that when it comes to trade, that should be an integral part of all trade, that the issue of human rights abuses and persecution of those with religious faith should also be part of that. So the right honourable member is right to set that scene, and others have spoken about it as well, and I feel incredibly strong about that issue. It chairs, as you know, Mr Chairman, the APPG for freedom of religious belief, and it's an integral part of our debate every time. Human rights abuses and religious belief as well, they go hand in hand. You take on one, you hurt the other, and vice versa. So really important that countries across the world, and China in particular, seems to abuse, use and people just because they don't conform to what they wish to see. Now, I, like many others, was delighted back in September when it was announced that funding was to be delivered for zero-emission buses, knowing that if we are ever to reach our global targets, then this has to be a major part of our strategy. It was great to see that towns and villages and cities across England, including the most rural parts of the country, were to benefit from new government funding for zero-emission buses, backed by £129 million funding, which is also to help grow the economy by supporting green jobs at UK bus manufacturers. I particularly call the press release, which highlighted, and I quote, to make sure that more parts of England benefit from green technology, particularly remote areas where building the infrastructure needed for the buses is more expensive. Government has prioritised the first £25 million for rural communities. So hailing from a rural constituency of Strangford, I'm very aware that we don't have infrastructure in place, and that this will take enhanced funding. The beauty of Wrightbus in my honourable friend's constituency of North Antrim is the capacity that they have for more. The potential in terms of physical ability, skills level, and the desire to press the research further and deliver more. They're always innovative. They're always looking to the future. They're always going the extra mile to the next track and potentially where they are. One of the reasons that I supported Brexit, as not everyone in here did, but most people did, was solidified before 2016 when I heard that a contract for buses was outsourced to Germany rather than Northern Ireland-based Wrightbus, due to scoring mechanisms. In other words, the criteria was weighed in favour, and I felt at that time, so it's disappointing that we have this debate and we're maybe underscoring not a Brexit issue as such, but another bus company that is taking advantage. I was therefore determined that our own businesses in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland should get first refusal. And to me, this is the foundation of this debate. And so I thank again my honourable friend for highlighting once again the need for full government commitment to British engineering, to local jobs and to development of world-class facilities, which there are. So I wholeheartedly, Mr Chairman, support my colleague, knowing that a rising tide lifts all ships. It equals the expertise, the staff skill, the research and development, the vision and the reputation that are in place at Wrightbus, and this should form a key component of any future view as to how we progress British industry and also meet our environmental obligations. At that time, the then Business Minister said, "It's been fantastic to be at Alexander Dennis and see how £129 million of investment will impact British bus manufacturing." And this brings our total investment in new zero-emission buses to almost £500 million, helping to kickstart a new generation of bus manufacturing in the United Kingdom and create good, high-quality jobs from Scarborough to Falkirk. We're leading the way. This great United Kingdom of Great Britain are leading the way by ensuring that Britain can take advantage of high-skill manufacturing while delivering cleaner public transport for passengers across the country. I would say in conclusion, Mr Chairman, I would gently say that we cannot and shouldn't forget the jewel in the crown of bus making situated within the United Kingdom, and that is in Northern Ireland. So I implore the Minister to ensure that our strategy, that's government strategy here, makes the best of what we have and can do, and to me that is found in an engineering sector in Northern Ireland, an integral part, indeed a great part of this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. As I always say, always better together. Thank you.
Gavin Newlands.
Mr Rosendale, and there was me about to say I agreed with pretty much everything that my DUP colleagues behind me said until our member for Strangford made his final comment. I'm sure he did so on purpose, as he always does. But can I start by thanking our member for North Antrim for bringing this debate forward today and for bringing this issue up again, which he often does. And it is, I think as the honourable for East Lothian said, uncomfortable to agree with, apart from the last sentence, agree with pretty much everything that all the DUP representatives have said in this debate thus far. That's not always a comfortable position for an SNP member. But I thought the honourable for North Antrim set the case out extremely well in the current situation, the current unacceptable situation that we face in this country. He obviously spoke of the three major bus manufacturers, and obviously I visited Alexander Dennis and Falkirk and Camelon a couple of times. I've spoken with him many times. He spoke of the 40,000 buses, no, 3,000 of which are zero emission, and the 4,000 British-built buses that were green and clean buses that were promised by a previous, I can't remember how many previous Prime Minister or whatever, however many previous it is, that said that they would be built in manufactured in the UK. And the initial aim of that commitment has been lost. And he obviously raised, and this gets to the crux of the issue today in terms of the imports, and that 46% of those buses have been manufactured outside the UK, the vast majority of which come from China. And I have to say that's the case in my constituency. I'll come on to say how good a job the Scottish Government have done in getting on with ordering zero-emission buses, but obviously we have the same issue in that we have the same imports of Chinese buses into Scotland. We have, in my constituency with McGill in Renfrewshire, actually has the highest concentration of zero-emission buses anywhere in the country outside of London, a fact of which I'm proud. The fact of which I'm less proud is that the clear majority of those buses are in fact Chinese manufactured. So that's something I would wish to see changed. Ultimately, these are highly skilled, highly paid jobs, the type of jobs that this government In fact, the type of jobs that we all want to see not just retained in this country, but increased in this country. And at the moment, we have the danger of losing some of those jobs. He spoke of the retendering of the Blackpool bus order, which was changed from Yutong to a UK manufacturer due to social and environmental benefits. But in my mind, we shouldn't be leaving it up to the operators or the local authorities to put those conditions in place, and I'll come on to that later. It should be for the government to do so. The chair of the Select Committee, my colleague on the committee, the Honourable from Milton Keynes South, gave a far more balanced contribution to the debate. He spoke of the Falkirk growth deal, one which I'm well aware, having visited ADL, and he did make the very fair point of Alexander Dennis, because BYD had been brought up, having previously partnered with BYD, and they did use BYD chassis. But that is no longer the case, and their new electric bus fleet is now entirely manufactured in-house. The member for East Lothian spoke of the Brexit bonus that was plastered inside of a bus, and the irony is that we are not seeing that Brexit bonus in bus manufacturing in this country. He spoke of decarbonisation and global warming, in fact, and how important it is that we do this as quickly as possible. He also made the very fair point that electric buses are not, certainly at the moment, not the solution for many rural routes, but in Scotland, and perhaps hydrogen at this point may be a better alternative for those services and some others, and the fact that Scotland is almost uniquely placed in Europe to deliver the green hydrogen that would support such an endeavour, in fact better placed than probably anywhere in Europe. The Honourable Member for Mansfield spoke of I think it was £13 million, he said, in terms of the scheme towards our new zero-emission bus fleet. He again spoke of the challenges on infrastructure, which I think we all agree with. He also spoke of his disappointment at not being elected mayor. I suggest the Honourable Member is somewhat of a masochist, addicted as he seems to be to standing for election. And of course, the Honourable Member for Westminster Hall West, who is always here assiduous and spoke quite rightly about the potential issues around human rights and religious freedom issues relating to some of these the orders. And the irony in all this, and the fact that we've had so many contributions from the DUP today, is that Northern Ireland has, by some distance, and I'm not ascribing any blame to the DUP for this, incidentally, has by far the worst charging infrastructure for electric vehicles in this country. An issue the Honourable Member has brought up previously in this Hall debates alongside me. I think I'll forget his concluding sentence, and I'll circle back to the sentence before when he says a rising tide lifts all ships or all boats. You can choose the version that you wish. And I think that's entirely true. I raised the issue in Transport Questions last week. The Secretary of State challenged the opposition's confidence in UK bus manufacturing. I thought that given the DfT or the UK government's delivery in this thus far, I think that was quite a brave challenge. We do have confidence in the bus manufacturing sector, but it's very difficult for that sector to compete on a level playing field with the significantly lower wages and subsidies available in China. The member from North Antrim said that, I think he was referring to the TfL deal when he was saying it, but we seem to be penny or TfL, but I think in many ways you can talk about in a wider context that when it comes to bus tendering or procurement in this country, we're penny wise and pound foolish. To save a few percent, we're sending these hundreds of millions of pounds of orders entirely outside of this country. I want the Minister to make it make sense. It makes no sense whatsoever to me, and we're doing economic harm. We're losing jobs to overseas. It does not make any sense whatsoever. So I'd like to ask him these three questions, in addition to the questions already asked by John from North Antrim. I wonder if you could directly answer these. Do you think that highly skilled engineering and manufacturing can compete in this country, can compete with China on labour costs? What work in government has been done in government to identify why other European countries following the same trade criteria obligations as we do manage to support their domestic manufacturing sectors a hell of a lot better than we do? And particularly when compared to the Scottish schemes, SULABS 1, SULABS 2, and now ScotZeb 1 and ScotZeb 2, would you agree with me that his government zebra schemes have been an unmitigated failure? And just to conclude, Mr Rosendale, the Minister also said in his response to me that those being awarded zebra grants can put social value in their tenders, but there's no reason why the scheme itself can't embed that social value in their conditions for getting government grants in the first place. Bluntly, local councils in England and combined authorities are under the cosh enough financially from this government. They fear expensive legal challenges from companies with deeper pockets than their own. The UK government simply does not have that problem. France, just a few years ago, began beefing up its social and environmental procurement rules. From 2026, public contracts must include conditions that specifically relate to broader social needs and employment protections. And to be honest, they're in a far better place already without the beefing up of these particular obligations in 2026. And it's no use the Minister wringing their hands and saying it's up to councils to decide that the UK government is ultimately the one handing over the cash. At the moment, that cash is allocated with no thought given or allowed to be given as to who will grab or to any industrial strategy or economic policy that might benefit bus manufacturing on these isles. 143 million has just been thrown at Zebra Round 2, and not a penny of that will be conditional on it being spent on buses made using labour that is covered by humane employment laws or with any kind of environmental accountability. UK manufacturers play by those rules. Their competitors overseas, who will be able to grab a share of that windfall, cannot say the same, and we all know that to be true. There are world-class bus manufacturers in these isles. ADL and Camelin is one of them, and one of the leading ones. But if the government carries on with its current course, they will be pushing bus making down the same road as our counterparts in the rail manufacturing industry, going from crisis to crisis, with the barely remaining operations here all owned overseas and supply chains completely devastated. So the government have it in their hands to stop the rot now and guarantee a future for a high-skill, high-value industry right here in these isles. They need to grasp that opportunity quickly before it's too late.
Okay, Simon Lightwood.
Thank you very much, Mr Rosendale. I'm pleased to serve under your chairmanship and to respond to this debate on behalf of the official opposition with you in the chair. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to the Backbench Business Committee for facilitating this debate and the Honourable Member for North Antrim for securing it. The Honourable Member is a vociferous, passionate advocate for UK manufacturing, not just for Wrightbus in Ballymena, in his own constituency, as we've heard, but for all bus manufacturers across the United Kingdom, and for that I thank him. This is a vitally important issue, and it's right that we've had the opportunity today for it to be discussed so robustly. And I'd like to place on record my thanks to the excellent and insightful contributions that we've heard from various colleagues throughout this debate, including the member for Milton Keynes, the chair of the Transport Select Committee. I share his desire for a vibrant zero-emission bus fleet in the UK, with the majority manufactured on these islands, and the need for fair competition, and that the true cost must be highlighted, and also for his mention of the end-of-life processes for those buses and how that should also be taken into consideration. The member for Strangford had me at lemon drizzle cake, I'm afraid. I would love to sample that at some point, but he also made the important point about the significant capacity for UK manufacturers to expand their capabilities given the right conditions and the certainty that they need. And the member for Paisley in Renfrewshire North, of course, on the real importance of recognising social and environmental benefits when awarding these orders. So I thank all honourable members for their contributions. Mr Rosendale, Labour knows that decarbonising the transport sector is essential to achieving net zero. Decarbonising what is now the single largest source of the UK's carbon emissions will be no easy feat. But Labour is crystal clear that with those challenges comes enormous social and economic opportunities across road, rail, bus. There are immense opportunities for secure, high-skilled green jobs to power our next industrial revolution. With bus being by far the most utilised mode of public transport, zero-emission buses are central to this. Across the UK, operators and local transport authorities are already taking great strides to decarbonise their fleets, meaning demand for zero-emission buses will only continue to rise. But it is clear that the current flagship decarbonisation scheme, known as ZEBRA, announced with much fanfare 2 Transport Secretaries ago as part of Bus Back Better, continues to be woefully off target. Bus Back Better promised 4,000 new zero-emission buses on the road, but also promised to set a date for ending the sale of new diesel buses in the UK. But, Mr Rosendale, neither of these promises have been met. The government continues to dither on the phasing out date, leaving manufacturers and operators alike in the dark. In July 2023, the previous Transport Minister, the member for North West Durham, promised in a response to the DfT's consultation would be forthcoming within months. Well, almost 12 months later, it is still the case that no Transport Minister is able to tell us on what date they will mandate the end of new diesel bus sales. The current Minister for Roads and Local Transport told the House in response to a written parliamentary question in January this year that more information would be provided in due course. Again, almost 5 months on, we're none the wiser. In the absence of leadership on this issue from the government, large operators have resorted to setting their own targets. National Express have committed to only operating zero-emission buses by 2030. And Go Ahead, First Bus and Stagecoach aim to have a fully decarbonised fleet by 2035. Whilst this is commendable, the continued silence from the government on setting the end date of diesel sales will doubtless have the biggest impact on smaller and more rural bus operators. The parameters of the government's consultation, launched back in 2022, could see a date for phase-out set, and I quote, between 2025 and 2032. Mr Rosendale, operators and manufacturers alike need certainty from this government. It feels like a profoundly short-sighted, anti-business stance for the government to refuse to grant this certainty, leaving it up to the sector to guess whether the phase-out could be as soon as next year or in 8 years' time. And, as I mentioned, Bus Back Better also pledged 4,000 zero-emission buses. I regularly quiz the Department of Transport on the latest statistics on the rollout of zero-emission buses funded by ZEBRA. In the most recent statistics I was able to obtain last month, just 313 are on the road and 1,053 ordered using ZEBRA 1. This means to date the government has achieved barely a quarter of ZEBRA's potential. The successful bidders in the next phase of ZEBRA, ZEBRA 2, were announced back in March, funding a further 955 zero-emission buses. But even if every single one of these orders are somehow on the road by the end of this Parliament, this still falls considerably short. Even the chair of the Transport Select Committee said last year it seems increasingly unlikely that the government will meet its target. Mr Rosendale, despite bold steps from operators, local transport authorities and manufacturers, it's clear that we've got a long way to go before we decarbonise our bus sector. So in his response, I'd be grateful if the Minister could tell me exactly how many zero-emission buses does he think he'll be able to deliver on the roads by the end of the Parliament. Because for the UK's leading bus manufacturers, Alexander Dennis, Wrightbus and Optare or Switch, the ambition and appetite for zero-emission buses is an enormous opportunity. Our bus manufacturing sector directly employs 3,500 staff across the UK and supports a further 10,000 across the supply chain. They are world-class, trailblazing manufacturers producing some of the most advanced zero-emission and ultra-low-emission buses anywhere on the globe. Not only are their products world-class, they are also vital employers, contributing millions to the UK economy. I regularly meet with them, and they frequently tell me their fantastic apprenticeship schemes and training and upskilling programmes. But under the government's approach to decarbonising the bus sector, these companies are at risk. Research undertaken by Labour, and commendably by the Honourable Member for North Antrim's office, shows that the funding spent by the government on ZEBRA 1, as he mentioned, 46% has been used to purchase buses built outside of the UK. The Minister will be aware that in addition to recent reports of more Chinese buses being procured, funding from ZEBRA has already been used to procure hundreds of Chinese Yutong buses already. And in last week's Transport Questions, I told the Secretary of State that it had emerged that a major UK operator is preparing to procure tens of millions of pounds worth of buses, not from Wrightbus, not from ADL, Optare, but from China. From China. Mr Rosendale, Labour is realistic about the fact that as demand from zero-emission buses increases globally, competitive manufacturers will be involved in this process in the supply chain globally. But we're at a crossroads here. Britain, under the Tories, risks losing the global race for the clean industries of the future, losing jobs overseas and betraying communities across the country. The Honourable Member for North Antrim is absolutely right to question whether taxpayer-funded schemes to support the introduction of zero-emission buses should be delivered more in a manner that supports UK bus manufacturing industries. But we must remember that this is the same government that refused to adopt a full-scale industrial strategy since 2017. Make no mistake, the lack of strategy from this government is putting our homegrown bus manufacturers at risk. Alexander Dennis tells me that with enough joined-up thinking from the government, they could spool up production in order to meet demand, but in the absence of clear certainty, may have to reconsider their future in the UK.
Will you now?
Certainly.
This is the Honourable Gentleman's speech with interest. I just want to clarify one particular point before I address the House, which is the party opposite's approach to continue to be part of the World Trade Organization agreement on government procurement rules from 2012, or is he saying that he's not going to do that? Because that surely goes to the heart of the fundamentals of this debate.
I don't agree with the Minister's assertion. I think this is about, as members have already said in this debate, about highlighting and acknowledging the importance of the social and environmental benefits that UK manufacturing brings to these shores. It's a profoundly frustrating position for our UK bus manufacturers to be in at a time when they should be leading our green transition. Support for UK bus manufacturers has just not been sufficiently integrated into the national bus strategy from the start. It's a damning metaphor of the government's attitude to that the Bus Back Better document had on its front cover an image of a bus manufactured by BYD, a Chinese company. Labour will always back British industry. A Labour government will act as a strategic industrial partner, setting out clear priorities and provide certainty that businesses and investors need to solidify the UK's position in clean industry. This extends across the EV supply chain. Labour will accelerate domestic battery-making capacity with a national wealth fund to part finance a new gigafactory capacity that we need to support the green transition. Not only will this create thousands of good green jobs in the supply chain and add billions to the UK economy, this will also provide a desperately needed degree of certainty for UK bus manufacturers who need this to continue to play a leading role in the UK's decarbonisation. Mr Rosendale, I will finish with a few questions which I hope the Minister will be able to respond to. On the battery supply chain, I mentioned, what is the Minister doing to ensure that as demand for electric buses rises, so does our battery manufacturing capacity? There are billions of pounds worth of growth that could be unlocked if ministers get this right. The government's battery strategy is a welcome first step, but we are already behind the curve, and the scale of ambition seen in the strategy does not currently match the scale of the challenge that we face, reaching 100 gigawatt hours of capacity by 2030. I'd also like to explicitly ask the Minister what steps he will take to support the UK bus manufacturers going forward in respect of everything that's been discussed today. Because in a similar Westminster Hall debate back in 2022, the then Transport Minister, the Honourable Member for Copeland, was asked the very same question. She said, and I quote, she would look into going further to understand how we can support British-built buses, and went on to say that she would explore the factors that may help to encourage competitive bids from UK firms. I'd be grateful if the Minister could update us on whether this work has progressed and whether he considers that the current procurement regime sufficiently backs British industry when it comes to bus manufacturing. Mr Rosendale, Labour stands ready to embrace the green transport revolution and knows that zero-emission buses are essential to this. The UK has a world-class bus manufacturing sector that can, with the right policies from the government, deliver millions of pounds worth of economic growth by leading this transition. We need to see more action from this government, much more, to ensure that our homegrown bus manufacturers can continue to thrive. Thank you.
Guy Opperman.
Well, thank you, Mr Rosendale. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, which I think is the first time I've had the opportunity to do so since you returned to the House, and you are most welcome, sir. I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman from North Antrim for securing the debate and thank the Backbench Business Committee for recommending that this take place. I welcome it, and I think it is an opportunity for us both to debate and discuss the successes, and also for me to set out the ways in which the government is supporting the transition to zero-emission buses. And I welcome, with respect, the nuanced way in which this debate has to be considered, because quite clearly buses are at the centre of the public transport network. We are aware, are we not, that there are 4 billion bus journeys a year. It is utterly to the credit of this country that we have created and support a variety of providers. And he is right that I am keen to visit Wrightbus, having sought to do so on several occasions in the past. And I should put to rest the cake rumours at the very outset. Our former Prime Minister was famously ambushed by a cake in a particular incident that is well known to this nation. When I visited the Honourable Gentleman's constituency in Strangford in a former role at DWP, I walked into the office, and there, I think her name is Claire, is his assistant, literally ambushed me with a lemon drizzle cake. And I won't try the strong Strangford accent, but you'll be needing a lemon drizzle straight away after the journey you've had, sir. And sure enough, I was then sat down with a large slice of cake before we did our meeting in circumstances which I'm quite sure will be surpassed, if not improved, when I visit Ballymena. The UK has a proud history and particular expertise in bus manufacturing, and it's right that we celebrate the successes that we have. And we acknowledge and accept that our bus manufacturers play a vitally important part of the UK automotive ecosystem, employ well over 3,000 people across England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And I would suggest, with respect, that our bus manufacturers are very, very competitive. As has been outlined, Wrightbus have the first hydrogen-powered double-decker bus. Alexander Dennis continue to innovate with new in-house series of electric buses, developed from the knowledge and experience gained from working hand-in-hand with international partners, resulting in 2,300 zero-emission buses hitting the UK roads to date. The vast majority of the buses operating in urban areas are produced here in the UK, and we are committed to continuing to make the UK one of the best places in the world for automotive investment as we transition to zero-emission vehicles. There are certain frameworks that I want to try and address as a start point. Clearly, not as yet. Let me just try and set out the position, and I'll happily give way to the Honourable Gentleman in a second. Clearly, we start with a position that the UK is part of the World Trade Organization Agreement on Government Procurement 2012 and the related WTO texts. And as my honourable friend, the chair of the Select Committee, set out, that is a basis upon which all of such organisations have to work. And were there to be a breach in any way, then as the Secretary of State set out last Thursday, then clearly there is a position that if there is in any way what is called the technical term is dumping, then there can be, when there's unfair competition in these particular circumstances, the independent statutory body, the Trade Remedy Authority, whose responsibility is to look at these particular circumstances if there is such an example. Now, it is the case that, for example, the UK government supports various manufacturers in a variety of ways. I'm going to try and set that out in detail, but before I do so, I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
On that very point, Minister, and thank you for giving way. In relation to other countries that are major manufacturers, and we will not speak about the elephant in the room, but probably we will, China sometimes are like some of our neighbours who fly fast and loose with what is termed as state aid. And unfortunately, those companies are getting the benefit of the opportunity to export at a reduced rate because of help and assistance, either directly or indirectly, that is given to those companies. Unfortunately, the UK tend to be too good at abiding by the rules and don't see that many of them are actually sliding under the radar and getting our markets because of what I would call shortcuts that they're taking.
The companies, I'm told, Yutong and BYD, are not state-owned. That's the first key point. The second is that there is always a degree to which, in this House we debate, the extent to which the state supports individual companies in their individual country, right? And I take the point that the honourable gentleman makes, and clearly, on one simple basis, a worker in China is not paid the rates and the salaries that a worker is paid in this country, with automatically rolled pensions and all the bits that come on top of that and all the welfare support. That is clearly a difference in scale. But I want to try and address a couple of the key points. No, I'm going to try and address the honourable gentleman's point. So, as the Minister in a former department, I was one of the ministers who brought forward what is called ESG, which is Environmental, Social and Governance Regulations. That applies across the City of London, it applies across all pension funds, and by and large it now applies across the way in which local authorities conduct their business, and they have to have due consideration in their purchasing to both ESG, but also more particularly under the Cabinet Office Public Procurement Notice 0223, they have to be mindful and cognizant of modern-day slavery in supply chain. And public sector suppliers must comply with all the applicable human rights and employment laws as set out in the Modern Slavery Act. And as was rightly set out, social value for the tender can be considered, and frankly is already being considered by local authorities. And there is a degree to which the organisations seek government to say local authority cannot do this. It is the individual local authority to look at the way in which they are commissioning, clearly matters of social value, clearly ESG, clearly the interpretation of modern-day slavery and the impacts of that are highly, highly relevant when doing that. And the fair point has been made by various members that when you're commissioning an environmentally friendly bus, commissioning it from somewhere over 10,000 miles away seems an interesting call, given all the consequences of that. But I just want to talk about, though, that we must be cognizant and aware that a lot of companies in this country do also receive aid from this government, all right? And I want to try and set that out. So he will be aware, I'm sure, of the funding and the research and development through the Advanced Propulsion Centre, which allows UK bus manufacturers to be supported by government to seize the opportunities for the future. Through the APC research and development competitions, UK government has awarded grants totalling £24.2 million for bus-related projects with total costs of £52 million. These late-stage collaborative R&D competitions are an important part of the government's support for the UK automotive sector's transition to zero-emission vehicles and provide backing for new market-leading technology to underpin battery and fuel cell electric buses. There is also £460 million in dedicated funding provided, obviously, for the zero-emission buses this Parliament. And their innovative technology is deployed, we suggest, at scale. Over 5,200 zero-emission buses have been funded across the UK since the government committed to funding at least 4,000 this Parliament, and UK manufacturers are leading the way. We, of course, in March of this year, announced a further £142 million to support almost 1,000 more zero-emission buses, and I look forward to the UK and manufacturers winning more orders. It is clearly the case that, for example, Wrightbus, I think it's been named the fastest growing and most successful business in Northern Ireland. Secondly, it has gone from a situation where, however one interprets the business as it was clearly struggling a few years ago. But on the back of the funding that the government has given for zero-emission buses, its numbers have massively increased. It's gone up from over 1,000 to almost double that. And bus funding in this country has pretty much doubled in terms of the government subsidy and support over the last 14 years. And so, with respect, I would suggest that this is a government that is fully supporting the bus sector, that is providing financial support, whether it is through Innovative UK, Innovate UK, or the individual supports in relation to hydrogen. But we clearly want... briefly.
To the Minister for the manner in which he gave way there. But just on it, he talks about government support. He may well remember, it was before his time as a Minister for this, in fairness to the honourable gentleman, but there was a Transport Select Committee report that said that Scotland had ordered just over 10 zero-emission buses per 100,000 people, compared to 0.94 zero-emission buses outside of London. So does that highlight the success the DfT have made of this rollout?
Well, there's pretty much nothing I agreed with what the honourable gentleman said in his speech, aside from the comments whereby he disagreed with the honourable gentleman for Strangford, because I also believe we are better together in so many different ways. Now, the long and the short of it is I am very proud to stand up and defend the UK bus industry, and also proud to defend and support the degree that this government has supported the bus industry and seen companies like Wrightbus and others grow on the back of that. And is everything perfect? No, of course it is not perfect. And is there work still to be done? Yes, of course there is. And is there still work to be done to ensure that local authorities and commissioners fully understand their obligations under the Modern Day Slavery Act, understand the impact of social value, understand all the consequences of any commissioning purchase, and can government work harder with, for example, DBT and the Cabinet Office to ensure those rules are then disseminated to the actual commissioners? I do accept that I think more can be done in that space. But I do want to try and set out that there is no question that, for example, £76 million in UK export finance loans and guarantees have been provided to UK bus manufacturers in the last few years, which is turbocharging exports. Wrightbus, as I understand it, is exporting to Hong Kong, for example, right on the doorstep of China. And UK manufacturers are continuing to win orders around the world. And that is a point, whilst we clearly want them to support and be commissioned to, for this country. But it is most important, surely, that they also can take orders from around the world. As my honourable friend from the Select Committee was fairly making the point, this is a nuanced argument that we want our manufacturers to be able to compete worldwide, and I believe they can. We also are providing certainty for manufacturers on the pathway to a fully zero-emission fleet. In respect of the final decision on diesel buses, that will be made shortly. Part of the process of that is understanding exactly the capacity and the capability of our UK bus manufacturing sector, because if one sets too quick a date, there are consequences, but if one sets a later date, there are also consequences. Finding the sweet spot of a date is something that we are very much engaged with, but we'll be making a decision without a shadow of a doubt in the very near future. We believe this will then provide a greater degree of certainty, allowing further focus on R&D lines and also shifting production to producing further zero-emission buses at scale. There is also the clear point, I would suggest, that as a result of the government's action, air pollution has reduced significantly, both since 2010 and more recently, since the introduction of zero-emission buses and its true ramping up since approximately 2016-17. That obviously there is a massive reduction in CO2, but I want to try and finish on a couple of the key points that were made. One honourable gentleman from Mansfield rightly made a variety of points. We clearly are working with local authorities like his good selves. The £8.3 billion in terms of road resurfacing, redirected from the HS2 second leg decision taken by the Prime Minister in October, has benefited all local authorities, not least Nottinghamshire, I know, and I saw that when I visited approximately 3 weeks ago and met with his honourable friend from Rushcliffe and actually visited on site and met with some of the councillors and some of the individuals. He is clearly badgering me about a variety of roads and infrastructure. I think the A614 is something that he is passionate about. I can assure him the A614 is engraved on my to-do list at the very top, and I will make sure that we get that particular project over the line, both to the benefit of his constituents and also the honourable gentleman for Sherwood, who has been robust in his recommendations on that. In relation to the competition on labour costs, I think I've dealt with that particular point. Clearly, that is a fact that we cannot disagree and ignore. The fact of the matter in relation to my old friend from Milton Keynes South, it's hard to disagree with almost anything that he said. I do try and want to repeat and restate the point, though. This is a nuanced argument. We want our manufacturers to be able to export as well as to supply in the local environment, and that has consequences to being part of WTO agreements. But at the same stage, we also want to make sure that we are supporting them as government as much as we possibly can. In relation to the Issues of modern-day slavery, I think I have addressed that and won't necessarily take that any further. I want to finish, to allow the honourable gentleman to wrap the debate up with sufficient time, by saying that I genuinely welcome the debate. I think this is an opportunity for us to cite and laud and praise a growing business in the UK. And in these tricky times, there's no doubt that bus manufacturing in the UK is growing substantially. The best evidence is Wrightbus, with a massive increase in numbers. I look forward to visiting. I look forward to being ambushed by a lemon drizzle cake in the appropriate way. And I greatly welcome the opportunity to set out the degree of support the government is giving.
Ian Paisley. Thank you, Mr Rosendale, and can I thank all members who participated in this debate this morning. I think there's actually been a clarion call, and with the small friction that has emerged here and there's been a clarion call that we are all on the same page. We want to see this industry flourish, and there's a vision to see how it can flourish. And whilst the Minister was able to have his cake and eat it, I think our companies want to see more cake, and they want to get more slices of that cake, and they're right to be ambitious in having that, and I hope that they can have it. The member quite rightly raised the point about he doesn't have a bus company in his constituency, but they're spin out in terms of opportunities for young people and skills development and all the rest of it. If we get behind this skill set, we get behind this opportunity and develop not only the best hydrogen bus, which we are already doing, we'll then start developing the best hydrogen rail coaches, we'll start developing the best hydrogen heavy goods vehicles, we'll develop the best hydrogen shipping facilities, we'll develop the best hydrogen aircraft, and we will be in the midst of a technological revolution driven by these islands. But it will only happen if we get behind it and if we push it. And that will lead to the jobs in my colleague's constituency. It will lead to the tech. It will lead to the opportunities. It will lead to success. It will be unrelenting. But it will only happen if we make sure that the strategies that have been put in place, we actually deliver upon them. And we make sure that we are not lazy at any point and throw the odd bus order here or there, or the other odd manufacturing job here or there, because we can. We have to get behind this, Mr Rosendale, and we have to make sure that the outcome is to the interests of these islands. Because unlike China, we're not at the cutting edge of battery technology. China is. Every single battery we practically have to buy from China. They've cornered that market, and that's fair enough for them. But we're at the cutting edge of hydrogen. We can take over that market, but we can only do it if we see the vision. Minister, get behind us. Reply in writing to me to the issues which I raised earlier. I plead with you, and I hope that we can see some of the success. When you come to Wrightbus, I'll make sure that Jenny Bristow, one of our local chefs, bakes you a cake that means you will forget forever any other piece of cake that you've had anywhere else. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
The question is, this House has considered the introduction of UK-made zero-emission buses. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.